Welcome back, seekers of forgotten lore, to Eternal Olympus. Last time, we witnessed the great Olympian wedding feast, the creation of ambrosia and nectar, and a dark, repeating echo of the past. Driven by a prophecy that his child by Metis would overthrow him, Zeus, king of the gods, tricked his first love, the goddess of wisdom, into turning into a fly, and swallowed her whole. All while his new bride Hera celebrated nearby. The joyous, drunken cacophony of the double wedding feast had faded. Olympus, after the unsettling drama of the trapped queen and the return of the lame god, was now attempting to settle into its new, glorious order. Zeus, king of the gods, sat on his great throne, his hand now formally linked with his sister wife, Hera, the new queen. On the surface, he was the very picture of absolute power, of ultimate victory and cosmic contentment. The war was won, the cabinet was formed, his enemies were punished, and his legacy was secure. But inside his divine mind, a profound, secret, and monstrous act had just occurred. He had consumed Metis. This act, a brutal echo of his own father's horrific survival tactic, was driven by a toxic cocktail of fear and desire. Fear of the prophecy, the ancient word of Gaia and Uranus that a son born of Metis would one day depose him. And desire, a twisted, possessive hunger to own not just Metis's body, but her very essence, her wisdom, her counsel, her craft and guile. In that single lightning-fast gulp, he believed he had solved both problems. He had neutralized the threat of the prophecy by containing the mother within him, and he had simultaneously absorbed her unparalleled intellect, making himself, he thought, truly invincible. As the wedding music played on, he felt her wisdom merge with his consciousness, a new, sharp clarity. A voice of reason he now possessed as his own. He had won. But the cosmos, even one ruled by a new king, does not tolerate such unnatural acts without consequence. The Taur universe abhors a paradox, and Zeus had just created the greatest paradox of all. A new life, a divine pregnancy, now trapped within the mind of a father who was also its prison. Weeks passed. The initial triumph of his cleverness began to fade. Zeus started to feel unwell. At first, it was merely a dull, persistent ache, a throb behind his eyes. He dismissed it. It was, he reasoned, the lingering effect of too much nectar at the wedding feast, or perhaps the inevitable result of his new wife Hera's incessant, jealous complaints. He rubbed his temples, barked orders at Hermes, and tried to focus on the business of running the universe. But the pain, unlike a normal ailment, did not recede. It began to grow. A month later, the dull ache had become a sharp, stabbing pain, as if a small spear was being driven into his skull from the inside. The stabbing pain soon became a splitting, pounding throb. And not long after that, it escalated into a headache of such terrifying cosmic proportions that the history of creation, short as it was, had never recorded such agony. This was not mortal pain. This was divine, existential torment. It felt as if something was alive inside his head. Something was moving. Something was growing. Something was building. Zeus roared. His roars were no longer the confident bellows of a king or the passionate cries of a lover. They were the raw, bestial howls of a creature in pure, unendurable torture. The screams filled the valleys of Olympus, rang around the grottos, echoed off the cliffs, and shook the marble halls of the new palace to their foundations. The gods and nymphs, terrified, fled from his path. The other Olympians gathered, their faces etched with concern and fear. "Brother, what is it?" Poseidon asked, his own stormy nature paling in comparison to Zeus's agony. He gripped his trident, as if he could somehow fight this invisible enemy. "Pain! It hurts!" Zeus bellowed, his hands clamped to the sides of his head, his knuckles white. "Get it out! Whatever it is, get it out of my head!" They tried everything. Apollo, the god of reason, medicine, and harmony, brought his golden lyre. He played the most soothing, harmonious melodies he could compose, music designed to calm the very elements. But the gentle, logical notes only seemed to amplify the chaos in Zeus's mind. With a maddened scream, Zeus snatched the lyre and smashed it against a pillar. Apollo recoiled, horrified. Hypnos, the god of sleep, was summoned. He attempted to cast his deepest, most potent spells of slumber to bring the king the simple mercy of unconsciousness. But the pain was too hot, too sharp. It burned through the mists of sleep like a forge fire, leaving Zeus wide-eyed and screaming. Demeter brought her most powerful herbal remedies, poultices of poppy and dittany, but they were useless against a pain born of divine, unnatural causes. The agony reached its zenith. Zeus was no longer a god. He was a primal force of suffering. "I cannot bear it!" he shrieked, his voice breaking. He ran from the palace, down the mountainside to the sea, where he found Triton, Poseidon's merman son, blowing his conch shell. "Drown me," Zeus pleaded, grabbing the startled demigod. "Pull me down to the deepest trench! Let the ocean crush me! I do not care anymore! Just end it!" Triton, terrified at the sight of the king of gods begging for death, dove deep beneath the waves and fled. In his final delirium, Zeus began smashing his own head against the sacred rocks of Olympus, the very mountain of his new kingdom. He clawed at his temples, trying to rip his own skull open to let the pressure out. The other gods watched in abject terror. Their leader, the all-powerful god who had defeated the Titans, was now writhing on the ground, reduced to a tormented animal, undone by a simple headache. It was in this moment of ultimate chaos that Prometheus, Zeus's clever Titan friend, stepped forward. He had been watching the entire Geverald spectacle in silence, his impossibly handsome face a mask of intense concentration. He, with his gift of forethought, recognized this for what it was. This was not an illness, it was a birth. He understood what, or rather, who, was growing inside. He moved quickly, whispering a single, urgent instruction into the ear of Hephaestus. Hephaestus, the lame smith god, the outcast, nodded grimly. He felt no pleasure at his father's agony. He was, above all, a craftsman, and he recognized a problem that required a craftsman's solution. He didn't say a word, just turned and limped as fast as his imperfect legs could carry him back to his forge in the valley. The glow of his furnace flared, brighter than usual, for a brief moment. The other gods, confused, parted as Hephaestus returned, carrying his largest smithing hammer and a massive double-bladed battle axe, a Minoan-style labrys, the biggest, sharpest tool in his entire arsenal. "What are you doing to him?" Hera shrieked her expression, a strange mix of horror and, was it hope? "Prometheus!" Zeus gasped, his eyes rolling back in his head. "My friend, please, free me." Prometheus knelt beside the suffering king. He gently told Zeus that the only way to alleviate the agony was to trust them. "Kneel, old friend," Prometheus said softly, "and have faith." Zeus, broken by the pain, with no other options left, obeyed. He slumped to his knees, his head bowed, his legendary beard matted with sweat and tears. He closed his eyes, bracing himself for the end. Hephaestus, the smith, stepped forward. He spat professionally on his calloused hands, gripped the thick wooden haft of the great axe, and measured his stance. He raised the weapon high above his head, the double blades gleaming in the golden light of Olympus. The other gods gasped, shielding their eyes. With a mighty grunt that echoed his work at the forge, Hephaestus swung the axe down in one clean, powerful, perfect arc. It struck Zeus's skull with a sickening thwack, a sound as dry and final as a mountain splitting in two. Everything stopped. A terrible, profound silence fell. The gods stared, frozen in horror, waiting for their king to collapse, for his divine brain to spill onto the sacred ground. But Zeus did not fall. He remained kneeling, trembling, and from the horrifying, neat split that Hephaestus had cloven in his divine skull, something impossible began to happen. It was not blood and gore that emerged. It was light. A blinding, pure golden light, pulsing from within. From the gaping wound, first, the sharp, polished tip of a spear pushed its way out. It was followed by the crimson plumes of a warrior's helmet crest. The onlookers gasped, stumbling back in stunned, wild disbelief. Slowly, majestically, a full-grown figure rose up from inside Zeus's opened head. Not a baby, not a wailing infant, but a complete, adult female warrior, radiating power. Zeus, in a motion that was part agony, part relief, part reverence, bowed his head lower. As if his bowed head were a ramp or a gangway provided for her convenience, the glorious being stepped calmly out onto the blood-spattered sand and turned to face her father. She was fully clad in gleaming, intricately wrought armor. She held a round shield in one hand and the sharp spear in the other. She reached up and removed her plumed helmet, revealing a face of breathtaking beauty. But it was not the soft, alluring beauty of Aphrodite. This was a severe, intelligent, formidable beauty. And her eyes. Her eyes were a matchless, wonderful gray, the color of a storm cloud or the sea at dawn. And they radiated one quality above all others: infinite, unassailable wisdom. From a nearby pine tree, an owl, the symbol of that wisdom, hooted once and flew down, perching silently on her armored shoulder. From the dunes, an emerald and amethyst snake slithered forward and coiled protectively around her feet. With a slightly unpleasant slurping sound, the wound in Zeus's head closed up, knitting itself together, healing instantly, leaving not even a scar. The agonizing, world-ending headache was gone, vanished. It was clear at once to all present that this new goddess was endowed with levels of power and personality that raised her above all the immortals. Even Hera, who instantly realized that this thing could only be the issue of an adulterous affair that must have taken place horrifyingly close to her own wedding day, was nearly tempted to bend her knee in awe. Zeus, his head clear for the first time in months, gazed at the daughter who had caused him so much pain. But instead of rage, he smiled. A broad, warm smile of profound pride and relief. A name came to him, perfect and complete. Athena! She smiled gently in return, her gray eyes assessing him. Father! And so, Athena was born. She was the embodiment of all the virtues that would one day define the great city-state that would bear her name, Athens. Wisdom and insight were her inheritance from her mother Metis. But from her father's warrior spirit, she drew warcraft, strategy, and statecraft. Law and justice, too, were hers. She even took a share in what had been Aphrodite's domain. But Athena's beauty was in aesthetics, in the ideal of art, in thought and character, not the superficial physical beauty of her rival. The love she stood for was less heated, the kind that would later become known as platonic. She was often given the forename Pallas, and as Pallas Athena, she would protect her city. There is a story behind that name. Pallas was a daughter of the sea god Triton and Athena's dear childhood friend. They would play fight, practicing war games. On one occasion, when Pallas was winning, Zeus ever watchful and fiercely protective of his new favorite daughter, intervened, stunning Pallas with a minor thunderbolt. Athena, caught in the heat of the moment, administered the coup de grace and killed her friend. Forever after, she bore Pallas's name, as a sorrowful token of her enduring affection and remorse. But what had truly happened inside Zeus's head? When Hephaestus split his skull, he did not just release a goddess, he released a plan. Metis, the cunning one, had not been tricked at all. She had done the tricking. She, with her mother's prophetic blood, knew Zeus's fear. She knew the prophecy. She allowed herself to be consumed. By sacrificing her own freedom, Metis had achieved something greater. She had become a permanent, inseparable part of Zeus. She became his inner counselor, his conscience, the voice of wisdom that could never be silenced, whispering advice to him whether he liked it or not. Those who speak truth to power usually end up in chains, like Prometheus, or in an early grave. But inside Zeus's very head, Metis could never be silenced. She would be the prudent check on the reckless excesses and headlong passions that so often threaten to get the god of thunder into trouble. His storms of temper, lust, and jealousy would now, for the first time, be balanced by her calm, rational voice. Whether Metis sacrificed her freedom out of a sense of duty, or out of a deep, abiding love for the god she had always adored, we cannot know. Perhaps it was a mixture of the two. It was her Moira, her destiny, to both serve and to love. Combined with Zeus's own charisma, his heart, his native guile, and his usually strong sense of justice, the shrewd inner guidance of Metis helped raise him into a truly great ruler, one whose attributes far outshone those of his father and grandfather. In fact, Metis became such a part of him that Homer would later refer to Zeus as Metieta, the wise counselor. The headache was gone. His brilliant, new favorite daughter stood beside him, fully armed and exuding wisdom. And inside his head, the voice of Metis brought peace and reason. Zeus was finally complete. He truly was the king. But, as we know, Zeus was far from perfect. Wisdom may have whispered in one ear, but passion always screamed in the other. And no sooner had the most splitting headache in history subsided than his insatiable roving eye, his divine lust, returned, settling once more on the target he had selected at his own wedding feast, the beautiful, demure Titaness, Leto. Athena is born, a warrior of wisdom sprung from the mind of the king. Zeus has gained a powerful daughter and an inescapable conscience in Metis. But will this newfound wisdom temper his legendary desires? A new object of his affection, the Titaness Leto, is in his sights. But Hera, the queen of heaven, still smarting from the insult of Athena's birth, is watching. What happens when the most powerful god in the universe pursues a new lover, and the most jealous goddess in existence vows to stop him? Join us next time on Eternal Olympus for a tale of a terrible curse, a desperate wandering, and the birth of two of the brightest gods to ever grace the Pantheon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and journey with us again into the mists of myth.